What's up, my friends? Thanks for stopping again at Ask a Guitar Pro. We're going to continue talking about guitar theory today, and we're going to dive into the world of chord construction. Now, I remember when I was first starting off on guitar, there was a lot of confusion about where chords came from, and basically what's G major 7 flatted whatever. You get lost in the terminology fairly quickly and what ninths, 13ths, sevenths, dominant sevenths are. So hopefully we're going to give a little bit of background today to talk about how chords are constructed, and that is the actual title for this installment is Chord Construction. So if you remember back when we first started talking about guitar theory, we talked a little bit about the natural scale or the Ionian scale. It's basically the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do scale, right? Starting off on C. Now I'm tuned a half step down here, but if we're in standard, we're starting on C right here, right? Right about the 8th fret. So natural scale sounds something like this. Okay, so when a chord is named, normally its tonic note that it starts with is how it's constructed too. For example, since we've started on C, there are a whole bunch of different types of chords that can be built from those notes that we just played off of, and slight variations of those notes we just played too. There were 7 notes that I played. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we repeat it again with 1 here. So keep in mind when I talk about, we're going to talk a little bit about how a C major chord is formed and then a C minor chord, but keep in mind that these different variations of C, or the different formulas for making C chords, they're not all in the same key of music. For example, C major is not in the same key of music as C minor 7th. You don't normally hear those two songs together, or chords together in a song. So these are just how the chords are named, is kind of the purpose of this lesson. So you're naming a C chord, whether it's a C major, C minor, C dominant 7th. We're going to talk a little bit about how those chords are made, okay? So we're going to start off with C major, okay? A C major chord, keep in mind we're going off of the 7 notes in the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, or natural scale. Let's call them by their degrees. We're going to call the C the 1, and then the D is the 2, E is the 3, so on and so forth, to where when you're back to the C again, that'll be the 8th note, okay? But we're going to call those degrees 1 through 7. All right, so when you play a C major chord, the formula for the C major chord is you're going to play the 1st, the 3rd, and the 5th of that natural scale, all right? So if you can see my hands here, I'm playing this note. So what are those individually? This is the 1, okay? This is the 5. Whoops, sorry about that. This is the 1. This is the 5. This is the 1 again. This is the 3, 5, 1. So basically what you have are 7 notes there, and you've got the first, the first I played was the 1 of that the 1st degree, 5th, 1st, 3rd, 5th, and 1st again. So all of those played together form a C major chord. So that formula, whether you play that here for C, or if we played it down for G, it's the same formula of the natural scale. It's always going to be the 1st, the 3rd, and 5th notes of the natural scale. And obviously they don't always fall in order, based on what you saw right there. So they can be in any sequence. As long as you're going to have a 1st, 3rd, and 5th arranged in any sequence, it's always going to sound like a major chord, okay? So let's move on to a minor chord and talk a little bit about its construction. The difference between a major and a minor chord is it still has the 1st and 5th in it, but the governing difference between how these chords sound is the 3rd note of that natural scale, of the C natural scale, is flatted, okay? So it's going to sound something like this. And it gives it that really sad sound. Versus the major, minor. So let's talk about those degrees again, and we'll actually find where that flatted 3rd is at. Okay, we still have the 1st like it was before. fifth as it was before, first again as it was in the C major chord, and then where things get a little different here is we have this note. That's the flatted third, because the regular natural third is right here. But we've dropped that down a step here to a flatted third. That's what gives it that minor feel, and I'll show you a trick with that. And then we move on to have the fifth, and then the first again. So here's the difference right here. What I'm doing is when I'm playing a major chord, and I pick up my middle finger, gives it the minor feel. Whoops. So what we're doing when we pick up that middle finger off of the G string, we're essentially flatting it down to the note I have fretted with my index finger, okay? So that flatted third basically makes it minor sounding. So major, you pick it up, and that's all it takes. It's funny, you change one note, you flat that third, and all of a sudden the chord takes on a dramatic change in vibe and sound, obviously. So let's talk about one more other type of common chord here, which are really probably the three most types of common chords in music, and that's the major, of course, the minor, and then you also have the dominant seventh, which it's called. And we could talk a little bit about diminished too, because diminished has a place in the four types of chords, because really all chords can be categorized as major, minor, dominant seventh, or diminished. Okay, but let's focus on now just a dominant seventh chord here. Okay, so what a dominant seventh chord has in it that's different is its first, third, and fifth are exactly the same, but its seventh is flatted. Okay, so this is what a dominant seventh chord looks like, and here's what it sounds like too. Most of you probably recognize that sound as being very bluesish, and really a lot of blues music is based around dominant seventh chords, especially as the tonic chord or the main song the chord is based around is often a dominant seventh chord. You can just imagine right here. So what's unique about a dominant seventh is, even though it has that flatted seventh in it, it still kind of has that major feel because it keeps the first, the third, and the fifth of the natural scale. So when we play that C dominant seventh, it sounds like that, right? Okay, so let's talk about the scale degrees again. You have your first, you have again your fifth, then you have this note here, which is the flatted seventh, which really makes things interesting. That's what gives it that flavor, okay? Then you have the third right here, as you saw before in the major. Then you have your fifth, and then your one again, down here on the high E string. Again, first, fifth, flatted seventh, third, fifth, and one. Now if you want, you can take your pinky finger and you can throw it on the B string too and flat that seventh again right here. Note that's the same note as. So you could do. So that is a dominant seventh chord. Now, in talking about these chords, the dominant seventh chord again can be mixed in different keys, just like all these other chords can. So just remember again that a C dominant seventh typically is not in the same key of music technically as a C minor or a C major. So anyways, hopefully that that clears some things up. But that's basically the kind of chord construction we're talking about, where When you have a C chord named, for example, you look at its individual natural scale notes, and then you sometimes keep them natural, whereas none of them are flatted or sharped. And you could also go then and flat a few of them or sharp a few of them, and it's going to yield different types of chords as well too. And I forgot to mention another type of chord that's very common out there too is an augmented chord, and we'll talk about that a little later. But don't let the notations confuse you. Now, one last thing I wanted to add here in the lesson is that sometimes you will hear a ninth or a 13th, okay? And people think, okay, what the heck is that? Jake, you've told me the 7 degrees scales, the natural scales, and we make our chords off of that, but what the heck do ninths and 13ths mean? Well, the idea there is that you could technically continue the natural scale when it repeats after you go 7 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You could start counting after that too. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, down to 13 too. So what basically you have there is another way to list a chord, for example, is to add another note on top of it by using a notation that would be a little less redundant. So if somebody says, for example, a 13th, let's see what that's going to be. You have your first 7 notes. That's going to be 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, so that is going to be, let's just see on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, so don't be confused by that. It's still a natural scale note, but it's just not called. It's just not called the. It's just not called the 6th note. Okay, it's actually called the 13th because chords are named that way. So it sounds so it gives the idea that there's another note that's added on that's a higher register note. Okay, you don't have 2 of the 6 notes. Okay, so the 13th is the same as the 6th, only it's typically an octave higher, if you will, or it could be 2 octaves higher, for example. So don't let that confuse you. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of background in chord construction here, but we'll talk about more chords in the next lesson and dive into some specifics. So check out more gear reviews and extras online as well at askaguitarpro.com. I'm Jake. We'll catch everyone next time. Take care, guys.